Itchy Go Itchy.
Hey guys, welcome to another Sketchy Go Ichi experience. In this one, I am actually going to get into creating original characters, kind of a character design 101 if you will. I'm going to be doing this in Procreate, my app of choice. I actually use Procreate, believe it or not, for my professional work. And I at some point made a complete transition into being a digital artist. That's not to say that I don't sketch what I've been calling in the real world. I do, but I love the sort of efficiency of being able to sketch in digital realm. So anyways, what I did for you guys is I created kind of a little game. I'm calling it the Quad Squad game. I essentially take a blank document, divide it into 4 quadrants, as you can see, and I put 4 basic shapes. Starting with the square, moving on to the circle, then sort of a triangle. For some reason I chose to draw it upside down, and lastly an oval. With these 4 shapes, you can pretty much do anything under the rainbow. And I rendered the 4 shapes just to illustrate that essentially everything you render usually starts with some sort of form. You need some sort of form underneath every single character to kind of give you kind of a starting point. So in this case, I figured the most basic shapes on Earth are these 4, and I put them on their own individual layer, as you see, and sort of grade them back a bit, creating a new layer on top, and then I'm literally just freestyling. If this was hip-hop, it'd be a battle. It actually is just literally just whatever comes to mind, and just applying these lines on top of those basic shapes, and those basic shapes serve as the foundation. Everything beyond that is just pure imagination, and it's really ultimately the whole point of me doing these videos at all. I've seen a ton of tremendous artists on YouTube with channels, and they talk about art instruction, and they talk about their technique, and I do the same. But in this particular series of drawings, I want to kind of illustrate to you guys or display that creativity, if you give it form, is limitless. And by giving it those basic shapes and just applying these sort of character traits on top, it allows you guys to be free, to live in your moment, if you will. And so there's character number 1, done with the square shape. Moving on to the circle. Again, just freestyling, applying these little eye shapes, and I really have no set direction of where I'm going. It's just really just putting texture on. And at some point I decided, well, this character is going to have some sort of octopus-like tentacles. When I render, I don't know if you guys have noticed, it's just kind of a single line, contour line, if you will. Everyone has a different technique. Everyone has a different style. I personally prefer to just kind of render in line. I know if you have a more painterly aesthetic, it would be sort of filling in volumes and filling in shapes with color and tone and texture to create the image. For me, I like to use line. Even if I were to go back in and color these afterwards, I'd like to sort of have a binding shape, a line art thing, before I move on to color. It's just something I've always done. Perhaps because I grew up reading comic books. Every single comic book had that sort of inked line, that really bold ink line, and it was almost like a coloring book. When I was a kid, it was really rudimentary color. It wasn't until probably late 80s, early 90s when they started really sort of doing really developed gradients, and computer color kind of got its real start at that era. And so, as you can see, it's just again, just whatever comes to mind. I lay the pencil down, which I should mention, using the Apple Pencil in Procreate. The specific tool I selected was Technical Pen, I believe it's called. It's in the inking set, and I altered it to kind of give it to replicate how it would be if I were using a pen on paper. So I monkeyed around with the texture of it and the stroke speed and all these different things. There are a ton of great tutorials. If you look under Procreate, that will give you kind of details on how to make that happen. And so you can kind of customize these brushes and pens and pencils to kind of make them work in your favor. So just adding little subtle details. Again, contour drawing. I'd like to keep these sketches on the quicker side, so I keep the energy. As you can see here, I'm sort of noticing that this guy is way bigger and he's kind of overwhelming that particular quadrant. So I kind of reduced him so he kind of balances off with his hairy buddy next door. Moving on down to the triangle. Again, not sure why I drew it upside down. Maybe this character was in there, kind of like the sculptors say that the sculpture is in the clay or in the block of stone, and all you have to do is kind of chip away at it to reveal. Maybe that's the case here. I don't think it's anything as grand as just first thing to come to mind and just let it happen. So this toothy character, again, no rhyme or reason. It kind of reminds me of a project I had. I think it was last year, maybe the year before, an advertising project. It was for a pharmaceutical company, I think, and they had me render these pathogens, and so I had to kind of come up with sort of these characters for pathogens. It was a fun project. I mean, it went through many rounds of changes. That part wasn't so fun, but ultimately it was, drawing is drawing, so I can never complain about that. As a matter of fact, in life, I really can't complain about much because I literally get to do this type of stuff, and they, pay me for it. So if you're not motivated by anything outside of monetary gain, this is not a bad field if you're willing to put the practice in. It's an exclusive field. As you can see, myself and probably literally a million other artists are on YouTube. All of them are, varying levels of fame, varying levels of skill. But what we all have in common is we love to draw and certainly love to share it with people. And that's, for me, the whole point of doing these videos at all. My desire is to make it so that, young artists or aspiring artists kind of can be inspired by what I do, and hopefully you can get a little bit of insight into some of the tricks that I use to kind of make these things come to life. I will, in videos to come in the future, I plan on doing really deep dives into some tricks and some secrets that a lot of us illustrators do to kind of get from point A to point B on any given job. And to make it look as good as possible, there are a bunch of little techniques and little tricks and insights that I can share. Like, for example, this guy here, this sort of spider-like thing, although I guess he's kind of crab-like as well, is literally just, it's probably a texture thing. I was like, well, the guy next door was a little smoother, so I decided, well, I'll make him a little furrier. And then at some point he got these little insect-like legs, and it looks like fly-like eyes, and that became that. So, as you can see, I'm taking him and kind of adjusting him so he kind of balances off with the other 4 members of this of the Quad Squad. I'm adjusting him as well, and I'm putting the finishing touches in a minute. I often like to render on a sort of neutral, sort of mid-tone color or gray, and with black line, and then I'll come in afterwards and throw a white highlight out on top to kind of give it a little bit of volume. Purely a stylistic thing. I don't think it's necessary. I probably could just render these guys black line art on white paper or a white document and call it a day, but I lately have been liking to add a little color to these, and kind of, I think it makes it interesting. Certainly, hopefully makes it interesting for you guys as viewers, and if it does, feel free to leave a comment. So, again, I'm going to go through each and every one of these and apply sort of a highlight layer. Just, pick a light source For this one, it's whatever's on the outside of them. The highlight source is up top clearly and to the left and right. That's what's creating sort of the highlight on the upper portion and along the sides. I think you guys noticed that it gives it instant volume just by adding that white highlight. I'm pausing on here, I think probably because I'm probably making some decisions on how long to do this video, and I don't want to bore you guys with a bunch of inane details. But speaking of detailing, getting further along in this project, I just wanted to go through each and sort of pick out little areas where I think the light would hit. One thing I realized immediately with this guy is if I just kind of put the highlight a little further in, not on the edge of the black line, it gave this effect of moisture or wetness, slickness to him. I don't know if you guys can notice that, particularly in the tentacle in the foreground in the center of the body. Just by moving it off the edge, it kind of makes it looks moistened somehow, which is kind of an awful word to say live, but it looks slicker. That's probably a little more palatable. And then these little drops to show that he's wet on the outside. That's another good point. Here's a trick, character design 101. I like to add little elements outside of the drawing just to give it motion or to give it some action, some liveliness. And that's with these little bubbles and these little wetness shapes on that octopus-like creature. It's I don't know, it brings the character a little more life rather than it just kind of sitting there flat on the surface. Oftentimes I'll add shadow, as you can see here in this sort of bug-like creature with the crab legs. He has this little drop shadow underneath him. It somehow just gives him a little more depth, a little more life. He now exists, I think, a little more than just being a character on a page. So I'd highly, highly recommend you guys do that with your sketches. Just give it root it on the ground, or if you need be, just lift it. Actually, you can see the little sort of white lines that I put on the outside of that little bug-like creature there in the quadrant 4. He's moving. His legs are wiggling, and just by putting those little white lines, it gives you that effect. Another neat trick to institute in all yours. So, anyways, that's this piece. Hopefully, you guys you can play along with this Quad Squad game. Draw your own quadrant, put characters in each, render them up, and do it over and over and over again until you feel good about it. So that's the piece. This was, again, done on Procreate. I love it. You should love it too. If not, just draw in the real world. So, anyways, sketchy go ichi. Live your moment. Happy sketching, y'all. Peace.